Hello Horror Hounds, welcome to my horror house. We have reached the end of our walk through the films of the Conjuring universe, finishing at The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. And I have to admit, it took about 3 attempts to get all the way through this movie so I could talk about it. I'd seen it before and I was hoping that maybe I'd find something in there to appreciate more, to get me excited more, but it just wasn't to be. I found it a bit boring, a little bit ponderous. It just didn't engage me as much as the previous 2 Conjuring movies had done, which is a shame because this is the 3rd entry into the main franchise, ignoring all the offshoots, and it does something commendable. It tries to do something different. Unfortunately, what it does do is not what I think it advertised itself as. It's once again based on one of the case files of Ed and Lorraine Warren, and it is loosely, very, very loosely based around a real life case of a man getting into an altercation with another man, killing him, ultimately being found guilty of manslaughter, and at the time, very briefly, his lawyers wanted to enter a plea of not guilty by reason of demonic possession, which the judge at the time said, no, you're not doing that, not in my court, don't be ridiculous. And from that tiny seed, this fantabulous tale of demonic possession, curses, and witches has been woven, but it wasn't the courtroom drama that the trailer for the movie led you to believe that it might be. If you watch the trailer, you've seen almost all the courtroom footage there is in the movie. So when I remember first going into it thinking, oh, this is going to be The Conjuring does The Exorcism of Emily Rose, which is absolutely a courtroom possession movie, and a very interesting twist on the possession story as a result. What this is, The Conjuring 3, is a very, very small hook that they use to hang their very, very large Conjuring coat on that rattles and jingles with all its bells and whistles. And the hook can barely keep the coat there and in place. The movie starts with an exorcism scene that is as over the top as any exorcism scenes seem to have to be these days. Just recently, The Pope's Exorcist came out, and all the usual tomfoolery associated with what people think movie exorcisms and possessions now have to be, they're all there in effect in The Conjuring, up to and including a shot lifted directly from William Friedkin's The Exorcist, and not just any shot, the shot that made the freaking poster, the iconic image of that movie, The Exorcist, that I must admit, when I first saw the movie, made me roll my eyes and say, oh, come on! The Conjuring films have never been afraid to plunder, but this was so blatant. and what follows is not something as meticulously and earnestly crafted as The Exorcist. It's a carnival ghost ride of a movie, which can be a hell of a lot of fun in places. There's a scene in the morgue where Ed and Lorraine Warren are trying to make contact through physical contact with the body of one of the victims. That's really actually quite creepy. There is an antagonist in this that is sort of like the anti-Lorraine Warren, who I think is a pretty damn good antagonist. The demon is a fairly ho-hum sort of demon, everything you would come to expect if you've watched any of the Insidious movies, any of the Conjuring movies, except just not as interesting. The absolute best scare in the movie for me comes when the little boy, who's the first one to get possessed, goes and hides in the shower and looks up, and there's lots of black rungs of the shower curtain, but one of them turns out to be the black fingers of the demon. I mean, that's straight out of M.R. James, but it's also straight out of James Wan's playbook and the Insidious movies. So it's probably disappointing for the new director to have the most effective scare in the movie be something that is essentially directly ripped off the James Wan playbook, and I don't think he can bring anything sort of new and fresh enough to the table. There's a lot of Ed and Lorraine running around trying to find the proof that this guy was demonically possessed when he killed this other guy, and the investigation spills out into this notion of curses and witches, tangentially links into to Annabelle with mention of the cult that was in the background of the first Annabelle movie, and kind of weirdly feels hampered by having to be about this real life case. And as quickly as the actual events of the real life case shrink into the distance of the rear view mirror of this movie, you can kind of feel it straining and pulling and wanting to just go buck wild, but having to continually circle back round to these real life characters and the real life case. So unfortunately, what was a strength, I would suggest, in the first two movies, when you could over your end credits show the photographs of the real people, and with the Conjuring 2 play the recordings of the Enfield haunting, the poltergeist sort of possession. There is a little clip on the end credits of this movie of an exorcism that Ed and Lorraine Warren attended, which was suitably creepy, but this framework that they've set themselves of having to use a real life case starts to feel a little bit creaky. What it also starts to feel like is incredibly cynical. I got a little bit wary during the opening of Conjuring 2 when they leant on the Amityville case, which again Ed and Lorraine Warren were tangentially involved in, and in the movie Lorraine states that their intention to be there is to find out whether there was any supernatural involvement in the multiple murder of the DeFeo family, an absolutely horrible crime, cold-blooded murder, and they tippy-toe around it and don't fall down on one side of the fence or the other because Valak the demon comes in. So there's never any moment where Ed or Lorraine say, yes, Ronnie Butch DeFeo was possessed when he committed those murders. But what they do in this case, in this movie, is to absolutely 100% say, yes, this guy was possessed when he killed this other guy. And for a real life killing, I keep calling it a killing rather than a murder because I understand he was found guilty of manslaughter. So I'm treading sort of carefully around my terminology here. But for a real life case where someone has killed someone else intentionally or accidentally, for a movie to then say, yeah, they were definitely possessed, seems to let them off the hook a little bit within the universe of the movie. It does leave a slightly bad taste in my mouth, because what they really want to do is tell this crazy story of curses and demons being sicked upon people and stuff like that, but have to use as their starting point a real life incident where a real person died, and it just doesn't sit quite right with me. There's more Conjuring on the way. I think The Nun 2 is still happening. There's just been an announcement of a Conjuring TV series. Be very interested to see if Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga are involved in that at all, because as with all the previous Conjuring installments, they are the absolute beating heart of the Conjuring 3, and I love seeing them in these roles. I suspect they're not going to do the TV series unless it's going to be a very sort of prestige mini run of like 6 or 8 episodes. I don't think they'll do it, and I think this TV series is going to be more like the Friday the 13th TV series, and it's going to be about it's going to be an anthology series about the items that wind up in their room of occult and cursed objects. A fourth Conjuring movie has also been announced, Conjuring: The Last Rites. Last is in the title there. Is that a hint that this will be the final Conjuring movie as well? Is there a grand plan coming to fruition? And can it be slightly better than Conjuring 3, which was slightly worse than Conjuring 1 and 2? Just not as enjoyable for me, for all the reasons I've blethered on about.
I bid you welcome.
I welcome you to my house.
Welcome to my house.
Welcome to my home.